There are 3 critical ingredients that are required to build a thriving community, and they are totally and utterly unintuitive. But recently I did a keynote at the CMX Summit in Redwood City where I shared these 3 ingredients and how we've used them to get some pretty amazing results with our customers inside of StateShift. Now, the good people at CMX, or rather Bevy, share the recording of the keynote with me, and I thought I'd share it here on my YouTube channel. Now, this is a super practical talk, and everything I discuss in this you can put into practice today. So let's go and check it out, and I'll see you on the other side.
Build their community strategy. He's written a powerful book titled People Powered. He's helped startups all the way to Fortune 500s and a well-known name in the community building world. Please help me welcome Jono Bacon to the stage. He is the CEO and founder of StateShift.
Thanks. Cheers. Hey everyone, how are we doing? Come on, how are we doing today? I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you to the CMX crowd for inviting me to come and speak. All right, let's see if we've got some slides up here. We do! We have slides. All right. By the way, I just want a big shout out for people who run AV at conferences, for people who put the next slide on the screen over here, for those of us with a terrible fucking memory, okay? All conferences should do that, all right? So, back in 2017, GitLab had a massive outage, right? Some engineer fat-fingered an update, whole thing went down. Now, most companies, what they would do is they would put their PR team on that, and they'd basically tell the press to go away, they'd fix it, and then they'd come back with a groveling apology. But GitLab didn't do that, right? Instead, what they did is they said, yeah, we may have deleted production data, could be a problem, and they started diagnosing the issue with their community in a Google Doc. I'd never seen anything quite like this. And back in 2017, social media was just such a glorious, happy place, and everybody was friendly to each other. There was no conflict whatsoever. So this was totally normal, is that, you know, sending love and good feelings to GitLab, get back soon, GitLab, we love you. What blew me away was this one down here, which was they started a live YouTube stream to diagnose and restore the issue. Absolutely blew my mind. And it's reasons why, like this that meant that GitLab could go from being this kind of like wannabe GitHub kind of upstart to growing and growing and growing, and then ultimately IPOing, right? This was a huge story. So let me ask you all a question. Does this story give you a positive impression of GitLab? Yeah? It's incredible. Like, I've never seen anything quite like this before. This is what I want to talk about today, is how do we engineer more stories like this in the companies and the organizations that we work with, right? But you're probably thinking to yourself, all right, who's this dude who sounds kind of British, but kind of American? It's the worst accent ever. English people who've been living in America for too long sound really condescending, so I'm trying not to be condescending when I speak to you. And let's be honest, like, that beard is ridiculous. Like, this is stupid. So I grew up, I'm not going to give you a boring backstory, but I was dumb at school. Like, I wasn't very good at anything. These are some of my grades. Yes, my name is Jonathan Edward James. Like, I'm not royal, I promise you. And there was a lot of passive aggressiveness from my teachers. Like, this is my PE report. Lots of, he has performed reasonably well. He has a reasonable understanding. This is the most passive-aggressive way of saying I hate this kid. So when I was kind of 18, 19 years old, and I had hair, my hair started growing inwards when I was 21 and came out my toes, I discovered open source. My brother installed it on my computer, and I used to work in a bookshop. And I went to the bookshop and used my 10% discount, and I bought this book called Slackware Unleashed. And the first chapter of this book talked about people from all over the world kind of come together to build this software together, and it just blew my mind. And it sounds like a massive cliche, but I thought to myself, I want to figure out every element of how to do this, like the psychology, the tools, the approaches. I found this fascinating. I then, a few years later, went to work at a company called Canonical, and I ran the team that built the Ubuntu community. And this is a community of about, oh, thank you. We built a community of about 60 million users. We had about 340,000 active contributors who were writing code, doing documentation, translations. They translated Ubuntu into 80 different languages, deeply opinionated group of people, which is not particularly surprising. And over the years, I've written some books, right? People Powered. This came out, perfect timing, just before the pandemic. We were supposed to give a bunch of copies out at CMX, actually, but sadly it was canceled and went online. Won a couple of awards, and then I wrote this book, The Art of Community. Do not buy this book. It's ancient. I talk about Google Plus in this book. That's how old this book is. So anyway, pretty happy with how that's been going. And these days, I run a company called StateShift, and we basically work with a ton of companies and translate kind of what works into what's next for the people that we work with, all right? Now, when we see communities working, we all know what that looks like. I don't have to tell you all this. Like, you are all in the trenches every single day, right? And we see people getting together and engaging and building amazing things together. I always kind of come back to, when I think about, like, how do we do this as effectively as possible, to this guy. Does anyone know who he is? Yeah, we all love this dude. And he says this: if we're in service of other people's success, good things happen to us. This, to me, is the philosophical approach that everybody in this room focuses on. We bring value to people, we invest in them, and then that value translates into other types of value. But how do we do this consistently? Well, the formula that I've discovered over the last 27 years of doing this is you create something, you bomb, you iterate, and then you find some kind of success. Now, I don't mean actually bomb things, for those of you who are stupid, right? The analogy I'm using here is actually stand-up comedy. So I'm a huge fan of stand-up. Any stand-up fans in the room here? Yeah. Oh, you are my people. Anyone recognize this guy? Mark Normand, right? Now, if you are easily offended, don't watch his stuff. If you just get offended at all, do not watch his stuff. He offends everybody, right? And I love this dude, right? Actually, we went to see him live with a buddy of mine. This is the face of somebody who's very excited. This is someone who's in witness protection. Now, when you see these kinds of stand-ups, you see them on Netflix. And they speak and they tell these stories, and everything seems so perfect, right? You're like, wow, this person's so naturally funny, but that is not them in a natural state. They start out here. They start out in crappy comedy clubs, and they go out and they try a joke out and they bomb. Bomb is that they fail. They don't just fail, it doesn't go very well. It's not like, oh, I posted a tweet and it didn't get much of a response. No, you're failing on stage in front of a bunch of people. Kind of what's happening right now. And what he does, he gets up, he does a joke, he bombs, he does 5 sets a night in different comedy clubs in New York, and then each set he gathers a bit of information and he iterates, right? So he maybe starts over, he identifies, well, I did this joke, it didn't really work, it had a bit of a weak premise. Oh, I was talking about a phone, maybe I should then convert that into talking about a friend, right? And he actually has a series online called Page to Stage where he walks through this process. Now, this blew my mind when I heard about this because I realized that everything that we do is about iteration. Is if we start, we do something, it doesn't go well, that's fine. We just need to figure out what didn't go well, and then we iterate, iterate, iterate. This is the reason why there are thousands of YouTube channels with 5 videos. There's thousands of podcasts with 3 episodes. There's thousands of social media accounts with 5 posts, because people give up because they don't get those results immediately. So to do this well and to iterate effectively, I think there's 3 pillars to this in how we do this with communities. The first one is that we start with the end in mind, right? I think this is really critical, is that if we're not going to a particular outcome, then we're just kind of moving the cheese around the table a little bit, right? And to me, there's a simple formula for this. Get super clear on your outcome, like what are you here to do for your organization or your customer? Be clear on who your audience is. Build an experience that serves that audience, that drives that outcome. And when you do this, you get predictable engagement, right? That's how this tends to work, right? So let's break this down into practical steps. Outcomes. How do we figure out what the outcomes are? Every company that I've ever met, that I've ever worked with, over 200, 220 companies, whatever, there's 4 things that they want. 1 of 4 things, or 2 of 4 things. They want more sales, more adoption of their product, grow their brand, or get more efficient at the stuff that they're doing, right? So we need to figure out what are those things that they want. This is not like how many followers have you got on social, how many people are in your discourse or your Discord channel. Those are things that are in service of these outcomes. Then what we do is we plot out graphs that track that particular outcome. So if we're focusing on adoption, maybe we track monthly active users. When we start with new customers, this is the first thing we do, and often this conversation is a lot longer than you might imagine, because there's a lot of thinking that goes into this, right? We need to fundamentally move that graph in the right direction, which I'll get to in just a moment. But what's critical here as well is one of the things that I was just chatting to Danny about this earlier that makes me sad about our industry is we have founders who come to us all the time and they say, I hired a community manager or a DevRel person, they haven't done shit in a year, can you help us fix that? And in some cases, that person hasn't done shit in a year. But in most of the scenarios, what's happening is that person's doing great work, but it's not connected into the outcomes of the business, so it's not seen as an investment in that work. So what's critical here is that you report regularly. We recommend once a quarter, We send those results out. We actually have a template we give our customers. It's not rocket science in how to do this, but you talk about the qualitative and the quantitative value that you're delivering. This is crucial, right? Otherwise, this is when people will say, well, why are we doing this? What's the value that we get out of this? All right? So this is the outcome. Then we talk about the audience. And I think this is absolutely essential. We get super clear on who our persona is. Now, this is, again, not particularly rocket science. This is an example of a persona template we work with our customers on. To me, the most important stuff is down here, right? In 1979, there was a study done that found that losing a $20 bill is far more jarring than finding $20 on the floor, right? Loss aversion is big for us psychologically. Likewise, pain resolution is way more important to us than gains. If there's two people in front of me and I'm a dentist, and someone wants to get their teeth whitened and someone has got toothache, who is going to hunt me out more quickly as a dentist, right? It's the person with the toothache. So getting clear on this then drives the kind of content and engagement that you push out that will drive towards the outcomes. So this is super critical as well. And then when we get into the experience side of things, a lot of people will come up with these like super elaborate ways of building communities. And to me, the most important thing, the bit of the funnel that is always the most broken is the beginning. Somebody just signed up, massive drop-off, right? So what I always recommend is you do what Microsoft did, right? Build a monopoly. No. What you do is they had a rule, and they basically said, like back in the old days when software came in boxes, right? They had a rule that from taking the shrink wrap off the box to doing something useful with that software, you had to be able to do that in 10 minutes. We should be benchmarking our communities on the same thing. Someone signs up for your community platform, great. What are they going to get? What value are they going to get out of it within 10 minutes? That, I think, is one of the most critical things that we need to focus on, okay? A couple of examples of this. This is a company we work with, Loft Labs. They were struggling to kind of get people into the top of the funnel. We recommended this set up a newsletter. Got to 3,000 subscribers in a couple of months. Delivered an outcome for that audience really consistently, right? So that's the first pillar. Second pillar is what I call rapid experimentation. Came up with the idea of this word experimentation the other day. Registered the domain, goes into my big library of domains that I'll never use. One of which is wall-to-wall-intimate-squelching.biz. That was a drunk purchase, as you might imagine. So what does this mean? When we're building out that experience, a lot of us will kind of go down the avenue of like, wow, we should do a podcast. We should do a social media. Let's use Blue Sky, right? And we'll have all of these different ideas. And then we'll just double down on those different ideas. No, what we need to do is we need to validate those ideas. This is the thing I've learned most about being a founder, is I come up with all kinds of ideas that I thought were genius. We'd spend a lot of money on implementing them, and then they wouldn't work. So what we need to do is we need to do lots of little tests, test those things, see if they work, and the things that do work, we then move the needle on more and more and more, right? Now, this is going to piss most of you off when I say this, right? So when we look at these kinds of platforms like Discord and Discourse and Chorus and whatever else, what we found across the numbers that we've tracked with the companies that we've worked with is that the number of people who come into these platforms, of everybody in your target audience, is about 20%. It's a relatively small number of people. The main reason for this is that certain types of people are wired up to kind of go out and hang out in community platforms, right? But to me, that platform is just one modality of how we build a community. For especially active and engaged and passionate crowd, right? So it's a very, very powerful way of engaging with the most engaged users that you've got. But to me, communities don't just exist there. They're on email, they're on events, they're on social media, they're in hackathons, they're in gamification. There are all kinds of different things. That platform is just one thing that we should care about. So experimentation is figuring out how do we engage the community across this different landscape of tools that we've got available to us. Let me give you an example. So years ago, I thought I wanted to play around with email, because I've never really played around with email automation. I looked at the emails in my inbox, and they look like this. They're just hot garbage, right? It's just basically a flyer that takes you off to a blog post. So I started looking through, like, well, what are emails that I think are really cool? And I found, like, this one from Ryan Holiday at the Daily Stoic. This is from Superhuman, which is a moderately overpriced email platform. But these are phenomenal emails. There's high levels of value baked inside of the email. So experimentation, or nexperimentation, is I wrote a couple of emails, popped them into my email automation platform, which is Kit, now Kit, used to be called ConvertKit, and then started looking at the numbers. These are some of the numbers, right? Now, you usually will evaluate email based upon open rate and click rate. As a benchmark, usually, industry standard about 22 to 24% open rate. Click rate is usually 2 to 4%. So these were clearly overperforming, which was great. So the hypothesis was proven that email is a platform that people care about. But why is this one getting 41%, the podcasting one, and why is, the 10 ways up your public speaking one getting 34% in terms of open rate? Well, part of it's the title, but then I thought maybe it's giving out guides. Maybe it's podcasting and media platforms is what people are interested in. Test, 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 and then move all the higher performing ones up to the top of the funnel, right? So I think we need to do this on everything. Lots of it took me 10 minutes to put those emails together. It would take 2 minutes now with AI, right? But this is, I think, how we then build out the ultimate funnel that maybe gets to the outcomes, such as adoption. Yes, we're going to point people to Discord or Chorus or whatever. We tested email. And then maybe the first start of this is YouTube, right? So I started playing around with YouTube. Another way of experimenting was to figure out, okay, well, how do I make titles of videos compelling to increase your click rate? Here's an example. This is using a tool called TubeBuddy, or TubeBuddy for you Americans. So this, why your GitHub project is failing and how to fix it? 2% click rate. Switch it to this. Every GitHub project needs to watch this. Double the click rate from just changing the title. So my message here is test, 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 test. And then what we do, lots of little tests, and then we'll figure out what's working, what's not working, right? A good example of a company that's done this is Dragonfly. We worked with them. One of their goals was 25,000 GitHub stars. So we kind of worked with them to map out how do you navigate to that? What are some of the things we want to test? It took them a while, but they hit it. Another example is Bentley Systems. These are a fun client because they're building in internal communities of practice. And my first piece of feedback to them was, your community is really boring. Nobody wants to join this. And they started playing around with scavenger hunts and things like that. People loved it, and it massively impacted their capabilities within it, okay? All right, so now let's move on to our third one, right? So start with the end in mind, experimentation over and over again. But the third one, I think, is the most important one, is we have to differentiate to stand out. I think one of the problems we face, in my mind, with our current online culture is that the internet's saturated. There's too many videos on YouTube. There's too much social media. There's too many events, right? I'm just glad we're all here, because this is an amazing event with an amazing team that puts on an amazing event. You should give them all a round of applause, by the way, because this is a phenomenal conference. But why is this a phenomenal event? Because you're all here, right? Where do you get this group of people? You don't get this group of people at other events. They differentiate with the CMX Summit, right? So to me, what's critical is we've got to weave things differently. I'll give you another little example of this, right? So email. We talked about email earlier on. One of the things I wanted to test with email was, most time when we see an email and it's got unsubscribe in the bottom of the email, we think it's coming from a computer, that there's no humans involved. They weaved it together, and then humans are ignoring it. It's just an autopilot. So in my emails, I always say to people, hit reply. Tell me, if you're using this, or if or any challenges you face with this. While I was putting these slides together, I got an email from somebody. This guy, Will, and he said, thanks for sending this. I'm curious, how do you define success in these emails? So I went and responded to him, and said, thanks for reaching out. Glad you find them useful. Blah blah blah. Open click rate. Boring, boring, boring. And then he replied back to me. Ignore the starstruck thing because the guy needs to get out more. But I blacked out the thing that he's talking about privately. My point here is we're switching out, we're differentiating. It's not just, I got an email and I'll just ignore it because it's an automated email. No, we're saying we're changing the recipe and how we do these things. I also tested, weirdly, sending Loom responses to people. If you're not using Loom, everybody should use it. Basically, you record a video, and it uploads it to a page, and you get a link, and you can just send them that link. This is great for those of you like me who hate sending emails, because I don't like typing. But look at the timestamp on all these. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, 2 minute, 2 minute, 1 minute. I can plow through 8 of these in next to no time. But what happens? They get the email, it says unsubscribe, they're not expecting a response. Then they get a video from the person on the other side, talking to them, saying their name, sharing something that might be helpful, completely reframes our association with that brand, with that person. I'll give you another example of differentiation. We run, with our customers, we do live events every Tuesday in California time. And I was thinking about live events. What do we all hate about live events? 45 minutes of slides, 15 minutes of Q&A, everyone's got their cameras off, right? It sucks. Nobody wants that, because we're all doing our email and vaguely listening in to somebody drone on about something. So I thought, well, let's rewire this. So first thing I always do is I say, everybody, turn your bloody cameras on, right? This is an expensive meeting. We're all here. Let's make it worthwhile for everybody. And then secondly, I give people a link to a doc where they can go and add in what do they want to get out of the session. So in the first 3 minutes of the session, I know what they want to accomplish, and we do upvotes to figure out where there's commonalities of insight and interest, right? This is all about we're taking what we're already doing, email and events and blah, 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 but we're switching it up a bit and making it more interesting. To me, this is absolutely key. And we can also get super fun with this, right? This is going to sound weird, right? So I used to do a podcast years ago, and we used to do a live event. And we wanted to do like a lightning talk session where, you know, somebody gets up and they do 3-minute talk, right? And we were trying to figure out how to, like, who would MC it, right? And when I was growing up in England, there was a company called the Rank Film Corporation. And the little bit at the beginning of the movie, like the MGM lion, they had a guy all oiled up in a pair of little pants who would hit this massive gong. And they do crap spaghetti westerns with the kind of movies they do. And I was like, I said to my friends, wouldn't it be cool if we had like an open source luminary in a pair of pants in front of a gong, oiled up, emceeing the event? And they were like, that's a stupid idea, we should probably try it. So we did. And it worked really well. We ended up doing like 3 or 4 events. It was super fun. My first list of people who I asked to be in the pants all said no. So we started leaning into our friends. Interestingly, this woman over here, this is my wife, Erica, of 16 years. This was the week we started dating. So you can also marry people with this technique as well. My point here is, like, be different. Try new things, right? It's OK to get up and bomb and try new things, right? So these 3 pillars, I think, are fundamental. Like, start with the end in mind, next experiment, and then differentiate. And I think the reason why this happened with GitLab is because they did all of those different things. The CEO of GitLab, Sid Sijbrandij, is a friend of mine. And I was actually asking him about this in preparing this. And he was like, I just felt like I wanted to build a company that was different. I didn't want to build the same company that everybody else is doing, because then I'm playing by their rule book, right? This, I think, is absolutely fundamental. But it's easy for me to stand up here and say all this stuff, but this is hard. And you're going to experience what Mark Norman experiences, right? You're going to have days where you're like, why am I doing this? Should I be doing this? I'm a massive failure. I'm not moving the needle. You know, that thing that Bacon was saying isn't really working for me, right? I'm dealing with all of these other externalities. People I work with, my boss is a bit of an asshole, blah, 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 blah. These are all the challenges that I'm facing. But let me tell you a story that I think will hopefully encourage everybody here to stay on the course. How many of you are familiar with this guy, Marques Brownlee? He's a YouTuber, yeah? Phenomenal YouTuber. He's got, as you can see up there, 19.9 million subscribers, right? 1,700 videos, right? When he did his 100th video, he put it online. It looked like this. He sat in his mum's dining room on a webcam. It's poorly lit. The content is not great. And what did he say in that 100th video? This is my 100th video, woo! And right now, I want to say a huge thank you to my 74 subscribers. 74 at 100 videos. The point here is that he stayed the course. Remember, there are loads of YouTube channels filled with 5 videos. There's loads of podcasts filled with 3 podcasts. There's loads of social media accounts filled with 5 posts. There's a lot of people who give up because they don't see the views, they don't see the traction, they don't see the responsive. But sticking power, in much the same way that Mark Norman gets up and he will bomb on stage 5 times in an evening, will get him to a point where he can do a Netflix special, and he starts really trending and starts becoming a real kind of mover and shaker in his industry, and we can do the same in ours. If you want to kind of get help with doing this kind of stuff, that's what we do at StateShift. I'm not going to do a big elongated sales pitch. If you want to come and talk to me about this, I'm happy to chat to you. Thank you, everybody. Have an amazing day.
Alrighty, thank you for watching, and thanks to my friends at CMX for inviting me to come and do the keynote. Now, what was weaved throughout my entire session there was captivating your audience's interest. And there are a ton of amazing examples of how to do this. And in this video, I walk through a bunch of practical examples of how companies like Duolingo, Coding Academy, GitHub, Clubhouse, Gmail, Notion, Netflix, Apple, Vercel, Canva, Calendly, Postman, how they go about captivating their audience's interest. So go check out that next, and I'll see you there.